And I hope you all are doing well wherever you are on this fine Hobbit day. Happy Hobbit Day to all my friends. I am joined once more by, it's a classic. I've used it before, but the Merry to my Pippin. Mr. Royan, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here. Yeah.
So it's been a morning for us.
Enjoy
We
it.
just did our whole recorded for over an hour this podcast for Patreon, for YouTube memberships. We did all that, and then we forgot to download the audio. Audio went away.
Don't say we. It was me.
No,
It
that's
was my
okay.
fault.
I should have
I'm
checked
taking
it
the
too.
blame on this.
But then I go to my backup. I'm like, oh, no problem. I always do a backup of our recordings, and then I guess my gain on Discord wasn't high enough because it cut off half of what Royan was saying. So I'm like, oh, this is not the quality that our patrons deserve and our YouTube members deserve. But we don't really have the patience to just record it all again. So I was like, hey, it's Hobbit Day. Let's go ahead and live stream it. So hope that's okay with you all as my patrons, as YouTube members, that we're doing this one for everybody on the channel. But good to see you all. Andrew Carlisle, how's it going, man? Thank you for your tremendous support. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody from who's all watching. We've got almost 50 people watching us right now, Ryan, or listening in. So this is what we do every single month. We always choose a Sunday out of the month. We sit down, record a podcast. Most times we actually remember to do it correctly. But here we are today. So let us know what you guys are all up to for Hobbit Day, and we're just going to go back through, I imagine the first half, it's going to be mostly just going back through what we talked about this morning, some of those questions, some of those statements, everything like that, and some of the news as well that we've gotten over the last month. And then we'll spend the last bit kind of going through your guys' comments and what you guys are saying in the live chat. So thanks for listening in, and let's jump into it. So, Shadow of Chaos on our Discord server. Again, access to Discord and all of our other podcasts are from Patreon and so forth. So, Shadow of Chaos says, what if Gandalf had found Gollum during the riddle section? Now, what we talked a bit about is I figure Gandalf is kind of screwed either way in the long run, right? So, if Gandalf had found Gollum instead of Bilbo during that section of The Hobbit, he likely also would have found the One Ring without knowing that it was the One Ring, picking it up, maybe putting it in his pocket, and then it would have corrupted him eventually. But let's say he didn't find the One Ring, he just encounters Gollum. That's also a big problem because, then the Lord of the Rings doesn't happen. Either way, right? It's not a good thing. But yeah, Royan, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, we talked a bit about this. There was some talk. I think that Gollum hides away from Gandalf, doesn't confront him like he does. Bilbo is a small, clearly not warrior hobbit at the time, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna eat you," and then they have the riddle. So with Gandalf walking through, especially in all of his great stature and building that, there's no way Gollum, the coward, oh no, this is the guy, unless he tries to hit him over the head with something. But
dude, he maybe would.
Even then, I still think that the most likely scenario is Gollum not be running Gandalf. So Gandalf doesn't know Gollum's there. Maybe he does suss out the thing here. Maybe he figures, oh, this guy's got a weird artifact. But there's so much other things going on with Gandalf's mind that he's not going to care. And at this time, he's really worried about the necromancer going on.
Yeah.
Also, not to mention Thor's company, Hobbit, that he's just kind of sloughed into this adventure. There's a lot going on with Gandalf, and so the weird creature at the bottom of the mountain, perhaps a weird ring, not worth his time, and he's legitimately not going to think about it for years, if ever. And so Sauron rises in the east, weakened men of the west at this point don't really stand much of a chance. The elves fading, probably dip out of town because they don't have a plan. There's no Council of Elrond. to talk about the ring, and so they're not really talking to each other. So
Yeah.
they just leave, and that's it.
Yeah.
Curtains for Middle Earth.
Yeah, and it's funny because we mentioned this as well. It's like I mean, first off, the power scaling between hobbits and other characters. I will admit it's one of my own fallacies as a Tolkien enjoyer, because I think games like Lord of the Rings Online and so forth have allowed me this idea that, especially even in the books when Sam takes on Shelob, that most times most hobbits could not, like, Gollum is only a problem to a hobbit, not to Gandalf. Right? Pretty much, again, one goblin is a huge threat to a hobbit, but you have somebody like Aragorn, and it's like, 20 goblins, that's it? No problem. So the idea that Gandalf, would be in any danger at all is laughable. But Bilbo, right, this was a big moment for Bilbo. So that power scaling kind of does go that way. Again, it's kind of something easy to overlook when in Lord of the Rings Online, your Hobbit Guardian can take on the same as a human Guardian, right? And so, but in this instance, Gollum was actually a threat only to to Bilbo and not to Gandalf. So, but again, like Ryan says, it's like, because even though the One Ring maybe wouldn't have done as much to, this is one of the differences between the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. The One Ring is kind of plays different roles in each one. In the Lord of the Rings, it's a lot more evil. It's a lot more manifest of the will of Sauron. But in the Hobbit, it's just kind of a cool magic invisible ring. So that eventually would have manifested in Gandalf, and that would have been it. That would have been it. So, I think Gandalf, but if they had Royan, if they had done riddles, our boy Gandalf, right? He would have come out on top.
I mean, probably. I mean, I don't see a scenario where Gandalf is worse than Bilbo.
Or worse than... okay. Yeah.
Bilbo beat Gollum. I think Gandalf is better than Bilbo. Now, granted, Bilbo did kind of cheat, but...
That's true. That's true.
I don't see a scenario. And I don't really see a scenario where Gandalf struggles to come up with a riddle. I think doesn't even... I really don't think he even gives... Again, Gandalf, sassy, busy, right? Yeah. Those are the two things that are upmost about Gandalf's mind. And so he's like, this small creature wants to have a game of riddles with me. I don't have time for this. Get out of my way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He would have... Yeah. Probably wouldn't have even noticed Gollum. It's like, yeah, get out of here. Cool. All right, we'll move on here. So Balrog of Morgoth, he says, the chapter of the coming of men into the west from the Silmarillion tells us that Thingol was troubled by dreams concerning the coming of men ere ever the first tidings of them were heard. Could this be some foresight because of Melion? Could Irmo, being master of visions and dreams among the Valar, have granted him these dreams? What do you think? Really fast shout out to Matt from Nerd of the Rings. Thanks for stopping in, man. Happy Hobbit Day. Yep, right back at you. So, back to our question here. So, could this foresight be because of Melion? Because could it be because of Irmo? What we were talking about earlier is this idea that elves generally have a couple special abilities. Whether we consider foresight magic, it's certainly something that is allotted to more powerful elves, such as Thingol, Elrond, Galadriel, and so forth. Círdan's perhaps got the most foresight out of all the elves. And so how they get this ability, if it's granted to them by the Valar, by their proximity to quote-unquote magic, aka like Melion, the Maya, I'm not exactly sure. But I kind of think Thingol was just granted these dreams about men because he innately had that kind of power. It could be, it raises questions. Does Irmo impact literally every single dream and dreamer in Middle-earth? Probably, but I think that's just something about elves, is they have some of these abilities. Take telepathy, for instance. And funny that Matt dropped in, because I actually mentioned his video on the elven telepathy earlier this morning. And something that hobbits would maybe consider to be magic is this ability for minds to speak to each other.
Not just hobbits. We would probably consider that magic.
Sure. yeah, you're right. Literally everybody except elves would be like, what? Because there's this moment, it's really small, but it stands out as interesting in the Return of the King, when everyone's making their way back up north after Isengard and so forth. And then you just see the remaining members of the White Council. I think it was Celeborn, Galadriel, Gandalf, and Elrond coming up from the south. And they all just like sit and just stare at each other, and their minds begin to communicate. So I wonder, with foresight, all of that, I just think it's a sign of being a powerful and kind of wise elf. But Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, we talked a bit about this already. We talked about this morning. My opinion on it is that I think that the telepathy that we see in the Legendarium is not the same kind, or not the telepathy, but like the foresight that we see in the Legendarium is not the same kind of that Thingol was experiencing. I think that is a misunderstanding, perhaps, or maybe they really can see into the future. But it feels more Tolkienian to me that you have these great wise elves on Galadriel who are more or less reading the writings on the wall of Middle Earth, doing a vibe check and puzzling over what things could be in play to impact what they see. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Silmarillion, Thingol is like, I actually, pretty much straight up being talked to, or otherwise like, yo, boss, let's things are not good.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the most powerful. He's the king of the Teleri. He's the only high elf Teleri elf, other than the Falmari, I should say, the sea elves, because he's the only one of the Teleri to really go, I guess the only Sindar, I should say, to go from Middle-earth, see the trees of Valinor, and come back. And so he's the boss for sure. I just wonder how much of that is granted power, I wonder, it makes me wonder, like, what must it have been like to be a high elf who had the powers from Valinor, from just being in that land under the light of the two trees? That must have just been like all the vitamins, Not only do you get your vitamins A, B, and so forth, but it's just like you get your vitamin Valar, and then, dude, you're just like this superhuman, got this powerhouse, like foresight, telepathy, whatever it is. I don't know if that's what causes it, but yeah, I don't know.
I like having Valar be a big part of this, because where I can realistically see some things that Elrond and Galadriel see as being like, them kind of just deducing from the situation, I could not see Thingol dreaming up on his own the coming of men. Like, yeah. there's no reason for him to be like, yo, what if?
What if there were other people, but they're not elves? They're like,
and they die.
Yeah, they're gonna come through and kind of like take over a lot of the world. They're not gonna be as like graceful as we are. They die. That's fair. Yeah, That's actually an incredible point. All right, my whole perspective on this has changed. Yeah, you're right. Like, even with foresight and stuff, how could he by himself have dreamt up the coming of men? Honestly, okay, so Balrog and Morgoth, yeah, I just see you enter the chat, so happy Hobbit Day to you, man. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the Valar, Irmo probably himself granted him that dream. Or Mandos or Manwë, because, like, they kind of knew that the second comers were coming, but there's no way that the elves, even with their power of foresight, right, could have foreseen that coming. Huh. Okay, yeah. Different conclusion than we came to before. I like that. I like that a lot. Any final thoughts on that, Ryan?
No, interesting that we were able to come up with something else after talking about this. But I guess that's what happens, right? The longer you think about things, the more things you toss through your head, the more likely to change your mind about it. As long as you allow yourself to accept changing it.
You're totally right. Like just as a bit of a tangent, right? So I'm also a teacher. That's my day job, right? And so that happens a lot, right? I'll have the same type of class over and over throughout the day. So I'll hit my similar beats, right? I'll say the same kind of lines and stuff. But then as I'm going through it, I'm like, oh yeah, oh, that's true. Like it gets better as the day goes. I'm like, oh, I'm still figuring stuff out better and better in my mind. So my like last period gets a way better version of the telling than my first period does. It's just how it goes. No, that's fair. Yeah, you just kind of, as you go through it more and more, you have these live realizations. So, cool. Jay Canary says, "What universe would you love to see a Lord of the Rings crossover with, just for fun?" So,
Before we get into this, do
Yeah.
you wanna touch on super chats as they come up?
Let's go ahead and do super chats at the end of the show. So we'll address all of our patron stuff here first, and then we'll come back for the super chat. But we do see that. Thank you so much, comic fan. Yeah, we'll come back to those after we get to the news section. So, universe that you'd love to see Lord of the Rings have a crossover with. The one that I kind of stumbled upon is probably being the most thematically relevant is going to end up probably being Narnia. But like Ryan said earlier today, Tolkien would have hated the idea of of that. The fact that in Narnia there's like a fantasy world and the real world. I think maybe that could connect well with like Middle Earth being the history of our real world, to where almost like Middle Earth happens and then Elfwine, all of that, Red Book of Westmarch gets passed to Tolkien. Tolkien has these ideas, and that leads to the discovery of another world called Narnia. That's probably the most natural crossover that I could see. I also threw out the idea that maybe like Game of Thrones could be interesting in terms of characters. There's this one picture of Game of Thrones characters and then Lord of the Rings characters like fighting each other, with like Tolkien being on one side and George R. R. Martin on the other. Not a very natural crossover for sure, especially thematically, but I think that picture is pretty sweet. And then Royan, which ones were you thinking?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I run into a lot of the same issues where it's like a lot of clashing themes, just kind of how to get over that. I think that the best way that these crossovers happen, because I don't know if there's a lot of things that Middle Earth characters like name from fiction to be like, oh yes, this makes me completely change my outlook on life. That's just not the kind of characters that they are. But I do think that there are many characters that could benefit from meeting Lord of the Rings characters. And maybe not their benefit, but my benefit. One of which is Baez from First Law by Joe Abercrombie, as I described it earlier. First Law, the whole idea of first of all, it's more of a grimdark fantasy. It's very pessimistic, but also the kind of overarching storyline through all of the books. Like, what if this Gandalf-like forever living wizard, instead of being like Gandalf, was instead like, I'm going to found Goldman Sachs.
It's so good.
It is like his counterpart is like, what if instead of founding Goldman Sachs, I am going to become a religious figure and start a religion. Like that's there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But I think that I would like to see Gandalf body Baez for my own person. Another character that I think could really benefit from talking to Aragorn is Rand al'Thor. They both got kind of like a chosen one vibe to them, kings, and a lot of weight on their shoulders. And I think that Aragorn is what Rand wants to be, but struggles to throughout a lot of the series, as tragedy continues to dump on him.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is it's like the conversations between these characters would be probably the most interesting and best part of any potential crossover. Right, Matt threw out Middle Earth and Warhammer. I don't know enough about Warhammer to comment on it, but it makes me think of Henry Cavill, which makes me also think of Witcher. Right, it's kind of funny like how certain characters would interact, what they could learn from each other. I mean, imagine Aragorn and Geralt of Rivia like training together, or right, one we threw out this morning was like, Obi-Wan Kenobi meeting Gandalf. And it's like, they could actually, that wisdom shared between them would be good. And then again, you'd also get the opposite effect of Sauron and Vader and Voldemort, right, all meeting as well. But like you say, the nature of evil is
they would start fighting each other. I mean.
Yeah, exactly. So, right, somebody threw out here the Wheel of Time. The magic system, right, would be too different.
Yeah, but Rand is also from Wheel of Time, so.
Oh, okay.
I think there's interpersonal relationships. The actual like mixing of those two worlds, I think, is a little counterintuitive because, again, magic is real in Middle Earth, but it's soft and subtle. It is kind of soft at some times in Wheel of Times, but subtle is not.
Yeah.
Weaving is anything but subtle.
Yeah.
Even if you can't see it, it's very prevalent throughout the series. Almost every character that you follow around either can weave or has someone that they kind of hang out with that does.
Yeah. That'd be the toughest part. Again, we were talking about even like how do you balance power in different crossover things? I always think of like Marvel, right? Thor's hammer Mjolnir versus Captain America's shield. Technically, one is the hammer of a god, and the other is just like a shield made by some dudes in the 1940s. Even though it's like special vibranium or whatever, but I think that's right, vibranium, not adamantium. But
yeah, you got it.
But then they just like clash. They're like balanced. They're equal, and it's like no way. Mjolnir, like, there's no way they'd actually be equal. But like for storytelling purposes, they are. And so if I saw a lightsaber clash with like Glamdring, right, it probably, in my mind, the magic of Glamdring would hold to the magic of a lightsaber, whereas actually what might happen is one would just cut right through the other. I'm not sure which one would cut through the other, but
I think you are. I think you're being nice to Lord of the Rings here.
Well, in Star Wars, there are some things that can cut through and like turn off a lightsaber, and I'm just wondering
which was dumb to implement in the first place. Listen, Star Wars is fun. Star Wars is great. However, you have to understand that just like comics, and just like everything else, there's a level where your expansion becomes you pass the point of dumb. You just have to accept that. That's just a part of life, and it's okay. It's okay, guys. But the introduction of all these things that like can just counter a lightsaber with like at best hazy explanations as to why is dumb, in my opinion, and that's okay.
That's fair. I hope I didn't offend you, storyteller 0111, because he was like, you're severely underestimating vibranium. But the thing is like, again, at what point?
It's hard to underestimate vibranium if every hero in Marvel ends up with vibranium at some point. It's like it's like the Tony Stark nanotechnology. It's like, oh, this is so cool. The first time it shows it, like, six movies later, it's like everyone's got nano.
Yeah, true. And that's the tough thing with crossover events is you would learn from each other's tech. You would learn from all this. Who would win in a fight between like Geralt and Aragorn? You could make an argument for either one, or they'd be like exactly equal to each other. But I don't know. Like that's always the toughest part of how do you scale power between worlds and so forth. So, cool. Let's keep moving. So R. Zimrathon has two questions. His first is, what do you think of the idea of orcs being a state of mind as opposed to a race? And so this gets into, Tolkien actually writes some letters on this stuff, similar to it, where, he pretty much says more or less in one of his letters that there are some people in the world that are far worse than orcs, or that are orcs, more or less. Again, that mindset kind of idea that orcs are crude and nasty and evil and just manipulative and all this kind of stuff. They have all the worst traits. However, Tolkien still does write that there are Easterlings fighting alongside orcs as well. And so there is this race element involved with the orcs being their own kindred too. and not just a mindset, because you have men that are still considered to be men, and maybe to even be like, redeemable and so forth, that are still just like orcs. So I'd say it's a bit of both, but we have to be honest here. Like, orcs are their own species in Middle Earth. Now, the argument that I want to make before I kind of pass it off to Royan, is that the orcs, in my mind, and I want to make a video on this here soon. In my mind, orcs have always been more like zombies than anything else. Because orcs were created from manipulated and perverted elves, right? Elves that were more or less just taken and tortured and mutilated, right? And that sort of pain, it is said that elves are able to pretty much take their soul and leave their bodies, take their fear and leave their hrora behind. And I think that is what happens with orcs in their beginning. So that they're left behind, the bodies are left behind, more or less being undead, and the spirits of the elves go back to Valinor. That's how I've always read orcs, to where, do they have a morality? Do they have a sense of like redemption? Throw at it rings of power, right? Are there baby orcs? Sure. But are they allotted the same kind of morality that our babies as humans are? Definitely not, because again, in my mind, it's zombies creating more zombies. And that's kind of how I always have thought of it. But yeah, Royan, what do you think?
Yeah, so just for a little level of clarity here, the question specifically was about like, are orcs a state of mind? Can they be like five? To that, the answer is no. I think unequivocally, the answer is no. And Yoisten kind of told you why, where the orcs have lost their spirit in a more contemporary religious. They have lost their soul, and now we could get into it a little bit. I just want to mention that Tolkien, devout Catholic. The Catholic Church. I am not an expert on the Catholic, but for the Catholic Church, the presence of a soul is what makes humankind a worthy progeny of God. So, the reason why hunting is not a terrible mortal sin, where, on the level of killing another human, is because humans are the ones with souls. Can't kill anyone because they all have a soul, and it's not to be trifled with by man. So that's why the Catholic Church is very anti-killing in general.
And again, with Tolkien being Catholic, it's like there's a lot of killing that happens in the books, but really the only time that it's met with some measure of sorrow, some measure of like, oh, this is not good, is when it happens between men. When Sam sees the body of Haradrim, and he's like, exactly. Yeah, this isn't good.
So with the orcs specifically, and this whole thing kind of came out of Rob, right? So Rob showed a baby orc. Everyone's like, whoa. What are you trying to say? I want to first rid of it. I will give Rob no credit to think that they're starting some great debate, that they're taking a side on it. I think that they put a baby orc on screen because they're like, what if we did? And got nothing more beyond that. So
yeah,
I don't think all these arguments are pretty much just kind of us arguing with ourselves at this point. But that said, I think that in general, the presence of a baby orc, there's no inherent morality attributed to it. Like you also said, these husks is such a great word. These orcs they're not necessarily living creatures in the same way that the other races that are. They're much more animalistic, even though that they can talk. And I think that we see this a lot, where orcs are inherently tied to evil. If you are, if you're working for some evil deed, you can manipulate and control orcs to do what you want. But without that, they fall, and even, without just the ever-present push, they fall to infighting. They fall to, fighting amongst themselves, toiling over, small things. And yet they are not divided when you see someone of, quote unquote good, right? If you throw like a man into the scenario, all the orcs are suddenly against the man, where moments prior they were fighting amongst each other. So why is it that no orcs ever turn sides? Like there's no
Mm-hmm.
personal beef with another orc that's like, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go fight with the men in this tier. It's because of that inherent evil quality to them. The fact that they are kind of hardwired to be against the creations of the Valar.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that, and again, I want to expand more on this in a video. I've always said I feel that dragons are like the drones of Morgoth. That they don't, Morgoth can't create; he can only destroy and corrupt, right? And so dragons, he quote unquote created dragons. But I've always thought that maybe since he didn't have access to the flame imperishable, since he didn't have access to giving free will, he never did. And so the dragons are just him flying around, like they're I should be more specific. They're his malice, they're his will, not him as like a transformation, but him as in like he's just putting his mind and his will and his thoughts in these creatures, and then they're flying around with that in mind. But they're just, again, they're also vessels of a certain capacity. And orcs, I've always just thought, yeah, they are the will of their master. They follow based on that evil. And so somebody brings up too, right? TRIG says the Shagrat Gorebag discussion implies that orcs have not only free will but also a sense of honor, looking down on the idea of leaving a fallen comrade on the field. That is fair. That's a really good point. I think they're not mindless. They can still hold formation. They still kind of have this sense among them, but are they redeemable? No. I don't think it's good to look at orcs as redeemable within Tolkien's works, because, again, then our implication is that all of our heroes, even our hobbits, are not heroes, that they are killers and murderers, and that they just aren't taking the time to understand the plight of the orcs. And that's a horrible implication, right? That's not at all... I have never read Lord of the Rings to be like that, right? That Aragorn wiping out... his people wiping out the orcs in the Fourth Age, right? The last orcs. It's like, that has a horrible implication. And I've never read it into that. So, state of mind, going back to the original question, state of mind opposed to a race. Again, they're certainly a race of beings, but not beings with that morality, with that sense of potential good. They are also inhabited by that state of mind, by that wickedness, by that evil. And I think with all the wars that we see throughout the I'm trying to think, right? We really only see orcs a little bit in the Years of the Trees, only a little bit. But in the late Years of the Trees, First Age, Second Age, Third Age, we would see at least one join the side of the Free Peoples. At least one, if any of them could. I'm sure. And we never see that. We never see one orc join the Free Peoples. So I doubt they could. I really doubt they could. And again, that speaks to some of my problems with Rings of Power, but also other adaptations where orcs are kind of acting in a way that might be considered good. So, yeah, I mean, any final thoughts on that, Roy?
Just one last thing with that whole point. I don't say this just to like give Rob credit, because again, I don't think they thought through. So I'm not going to give them credit for accidentally doing this right. But even in a moment where we have an opportunity for the orcs to actually like work, with Adar and his orcs to work with the elves against Sauron, they still choose not to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
So...
That's fair. Cool. All right. Also, so this is our Zimmerthon again. Also, if someone were to make an animated adaptation of Akelabeth, right, the story of the downfall of Numenor, who do you think should voice Sauron? So Roy and I, we went through, we tried to find actors. We don't have to repeat that because we really didn't find many others than the ones already talked about in our Discord that would be good for this. In my mind, animated adaptation, it should be Benedict Cumberbatch. I liked his performance of Sauron in The Hobbit, but like, I think in Akelabeth, he needs that time to also be more or less like his British, kind of like elitist, sophisticated self, where he's manipulating the people of Numenor and saying the Valar are underestimating you. They are keeping you weak. You are stronger than they, and you should attack and assault Valinor, right? All this kind of manipulation. Benedict Cumberbatch, if given enough of his, he could pull it off. They just need to let him do his whole acting prowess to do so. You know, like if he goes from scene to scene and kind of goes through his range of acting, right? That's great. I think he could do that, even in an animated sort of sense where he's just doing the voice. Yeah, Royan, what do you think?
I'm with you on the same thing. There's like Benedict Cumberbatch brings a level of like sophisticated evil that I think Sauron needs to pull off. To pull off the whole everything that he did, right? Like he's all the machinations, all of the slow, careful corruption. I think it just needs an imposing, yet clearly not out for your own good, but still, like, I guess he's making sense kind of presence. And that's kind of what Benedict.
I will say I'm curious to see how. I need to learn more of the actors from Rings of Power, but how the current actor for Anatar, for Sauron, when he returns to Numenor and kind of manipulates that, I'm curious to see how he does. I think he'll be able to pull it off, to be honest. So seeing his manipulation of Celebrimbor in the show and actually being quite happy with that, I think it'll be good. I'm hoping it will. But if we're talking full Akalabeth, there's going to be stuff that they probably won't be able to show in the show. But voicing Sauron. So I think Benedict Cumberbatch still a great choice. Marion Baggins says, I have other questions, but because of what happened recently, who would you cast James Earl Jones in if he were in Arda? So rest in peace, James Earl Jones, absolute legend, of course, right? I think. So we came up with a couple different ones from Silmarillion to Lord of the Rings. And really, this was the Discord one for the Silmarillion. I could not think of a better character in the Silmarillion that he could play than Mandos. Totally right. Like, Discord was talking about Mandos saying some of the quotes that he has in James Earl Jones's voice, incredible. Not the first. When he says about being slain in Valinor, right? And let me see. There's the curse of the Noldor as well. Just imagine this in the voice of James Earl Jones. Tears unnumbered ye shall shed, and the Valar will fence Valinor against you and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountains. Like, imagine that in James Earl Jones's voice. Incredible. Incredible. So, I think Silmarillion, it has to be, he's got to be Mandos. I would say in terms of Lord of the Rings, I actually think James Earl Jones would make an incredible Denethor. I'm thinking back to his performance in Conan the Barbarian, and I think he'd be great as kind of this broken lord who's giving into the shadows of doubt and darkness. But yeah, Royan, what do you think?
Yeah, the more I think about your Denethor, I think it's really better than what I brought to the table, which to mine was the potentially the King of the Dead as like a really trying to take use of that commanding voice, that imposing like aspect of it, having Vigo playing Aragorn, like facing against it, just the raw power that comes with it. I think could make for a good scene, but I still think that Denethor.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it has to be somebody with a commanding presence, and so forth. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just saw this in the chat, and sorry about the audio that just bugged out there for everybody listening. But they did release a look at Tales of the Shire, and so I'm just going to scan through that. We'll talk about that towards the end in our news section.
We will talk about more other stuff. We're still trying to get through everything that we chatted about in our Lost and Forgotten podcast. Or I guess lost but not forgotten.
Yeah. I mean that is one good thing. Sorry again about that audio. Let me scan through that really fast here. Okay, just to kind of get a look at what we'll talk about in the news section. But yeah, I think James Earl Jones, Denethor, King of the Dead, maybe even a Saruman kind of figure. I think sophisticated with the sense of kind of looming evil would be quite interesting, quite good.
Yeah.
So, Cool. Well, speaking of news, let's jump into that, and then we'll jump into the comment section that you guys are leaving here, as well as our super chats. So, first bit of news that we have, and again, just a reminder for everybody who's kind of coming through and joining us now. Thanks for being here. Happy Hobbit Day. We do this every month on our Patreon and our YouTube memberships. We go through the news, we go through questions and ideas that you all have. You can join us on our Discord all through Patreon. Just $1 a month gets you access to all this stuff. This is our 77th podcast. Again, we post every month, so thank you for those supporting us there. Really appreciate it. Helps keep the channel afloat. So our news that has come across my desk this month is that the first is it's talked about that we might get 2 Gollum movies. If you want to follow along with the article that I have, it should be in the description of this live stream. But 2 Gollum movies potentially. At least this has been, again, a rumor. We also got rumors of casting, that Ian McKellen wants to do the role of Gandalf again, but he says it has to be soon. He is 85 years old, so that would be amazing to see him on screen as Gandalf again. Absolutely. It'd just bring back all of our childhoods and all that stuff, right? So be amazing to see him. Viggo Mortensen has been approached, Orlando Bloom has been approached, and then obviously we got Andy Serkis at the helm of all this. So as for the 2 Gollum movies, not a fan of that if we split up the Gollum story, the Hunt for Gollum story, into 2 movies. There's already that Hunt for Gollum fan film, right? Shout out to that. I've loved that movie ever since I first saw it, but that fan film is a solid, 90 minutes, I think. I think if we're doing it more Hollywood, tying it into Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings universe, I think 1 solid movie is perfect for that story, unless they're going into more of Aragorn's backstory and so forth. Because Gollum, it does kind of sadden me that Gollum has the most adaptations out of any character in Middle-earth. In video games, in movies, and I don't get how that's possible. He appears so often, with whether it's a Gollum game, whether it's now this movie. It's he's got a good story, don't get me wrong, but the fact that he continues to be the center of so many different adaptations, rather than Aragorn's backstory, rather than maybe the fall of Moria, all things that can be found in the appendices, rather than the Angmar War, the Gondorian Civil War, we just keep getting Gollum. I think that's a bit of a shame, but I'm happy to get this movie. I just don't think we need 2 of them. I don't think, if we're going to get another Lord of the Rings movie, have it be one of those other options that I just mentioned. But Royan, what do you think?
So I do think that me and Yoisen are still a little bit on different sides of this. I can realistically see, especially now that I just realized that the fan movie is already 90 minutes long. Mm-hmm. A movie.
Oh yeah.
I could, adding more characters to this, and presumably, so my position on this is I don't think that you can use the Hobbit as an example for this, because these are 2 inherently different stories. First being that the Hobbit is it's very tight, it's very clean, right? You're with the story the whole time. There's no great big gaps where it's and then months pass before we pick up the story again and take a look back into it. That is what happens with the Hunt for Gollum. There are years spent with Aragorn and Gandalf looking, and then just Aragorn, and there's Gandalf doing the research. And I don't think we don't need to see Gandalf doing a bunch of research on the side. Unless I don't know. I couldn't really see how that would be very. But I could realistically see them adding more to the front end of this. We talked about how showing some stuff before with Aragorn's life a little bit before Gandalf shows up, showing some of his earlier interactions with Elrond and Arwen, and him working to become the ranger that we see him in the War of the Ring. And then, I could realistically see how this could balloon into 2 movies, even without needing to completely throw in a whole bunch of stuff. But the caveat is always if you are going to be adding things, even if they are just bridges between moments that we do see that are years apart, you gotta do it well, and it's tough because we keep seeing people trying to do stuff and failing. So, you know, the introductions to try to really squeeze out of the Hobbit didn't work out. Rob doesn't seem to be working. So there's uh there's definitely precariousness to it, but I don't think it's a full non-starter that
Sure.
the reaction seems to have been about. But I guess we'll see. We'll hear
Yeah.
a lot more about it in coming times. We got a while, it seems, and anything happens, and so I'm not necessarily optimistic about Ian McKellen's reprisal. Uh,
Yeah.
just because I don't know if this has really gotten off the ground enough to where we can actually expect this to happen.
I mean, they're aiming for 2026, which is actually a really fast turnaround because we just found out that these were the movies in the works. Right, we knew a year and a half ago Warner Brothers was working on new Lord of the Rings movies. We weren't sure what, and then 6 months ago or so, we were told it was going to be Hunt for Gollum, and now they're approaching Ian McKellen. So I guess they haven't started probably like filming. I guess right.
I mean, at the time of this
photography.
interview, he hasn't even read the script yet.
Right. Oh,
So
so yeah, there you go. And so 2026 is a bit ambitious for all of that, I suppose. You're right. Yeah. It's tough too because again, if we get two movies and it's trying to tie into the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, one thing has always been like 17 years passed between Bilbo's birthday party and the start of like the actual adventure that Frodo goes on. Does not feel like that in the movies. So I wonder if they're going to keep that going. It doesn't feel when you watch the movies that the Hunt for Gollum quest actually happened in that way. And again, I think Gandalf says, "I looked everywhere for the creature Gollum." Right? He says that in the movies, and it's like, oh, so you didn't find him in the movies, but in the books, they definitely did. I don't know if they're gonna just sweep that under the rug, but just to have a new movie here, but a couple weird things that they'll have to figure out. But yeah, cool. So there's that. Hoping to get more in terms of news. This is going to be the one that we're all starting to wait for now. Rings of Power season 3 is years out. Probably going to be another 2 years anyway, so also 2026. And then this one's going to be the next one we're waiting for more news on. So cool. Tales of the Shire. Speaking of news, right? So this is our final news piece. And then we'll jump into super chats. But Tales of the Shire, the cozy Hobbitish Shire game, is pushed into 2025. And as of recording, right, and this is what I was looking at earlier, this game has been kind of looked at and revealed a bit more for Hobbit Day. So after this live stream, head on over to Tales of the Shire and watch kind of their more in-depth stuff. I was trying to scan through it earlier, but I mean, yeah, it looks like it's getting more developed. I think pushing it into 2025 is a good thing. Because Royan, right, you were saying that this thing needed more time in the oven, based on
so
what
yeah,
you
that
could tell.
original look from months ago now. Just full transparency. I'm currently watching their like showcase inside look at 2x speed with no audio. And what is concerning to me is that even at 2x speed, the speed at which characters walk looks slow.
Oh, okay.
But everything looks way better than it did in that first like little reveal. From like a graphical flowing perspective, there definitely seems to be a lot more in depth to this game than I thought. I really did think it was just going to be farming sim, but it seems like they really are going a lot more into everything about the Hobbit life. So if that's something that you guys are, that kind of ties out to you. Now, granted, there is farming, shocker, but a lot more cooking, it looks like, as well, and even some interpersonal relationships, hobbits around, and home decorating and stuff like that. So it seems to be a lot. I'm glad that in many ways, I'm glad that all the technical problems we had, all the technical problems I had, have led
That's
us
okay.
to doing a live stream, which has led us to being essentially 2.5 hours behind which has led me to be able to watch this because now I actually feel a lot better about Tales of the Shire than I did 2 hours ago.
Good.
So
good. That yeah, I want to review it a bit later as well. Just check it out on my own, but good. I wasn't sure what we'd be looking like for this game. And again, cozy games are not really typically my thing. I've never really played them. So I'm curious. A winter window for this release would be perfect because everybody's thinking about, oh man, we miss spring and being outside, and then you just go and play your Shire game and you feel a little cozier, right? So hopefully, yeah, if they're showing some good things, and honestly, if they're confident enough about it to release this on Hobbit Day, that's great, especially with 3-4 months or whatever it is till the end of the year, and then their release year. So that's good. So cool. Any thoughts on that before we jump to super chats?
No.
Awesome. So that is typically what one of our podcasts looks like, right? Again, every month we do that. So it's usually 30 minutes to an hour of us just kind of going through and rambling about sometimes longer. Yeah. So I think our longest one was like hour and 40.
Usually there's some babbling as we try to bring thoughts together on spot. We if we thought that we were stammering a bit here, we have had the benefit of thinking about these same questions for an extra like hour and change. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's some rambling, but that's a good podcast for you. So Comic Fan, thank you so much for the super chat, and Comic Nut, thank you as well. Let's jump into your guys' questions. So Comic Fan says, you could cut off the Harfoots in the Rings of Power and not miss a thing. Plus, what do you think Radagast would have done if he joined the Fellowship? Interesting. So, Harfoots, totally agree. I've talked to Royan. I've talked to my dad, right, big Lord of the Rings fan as well, about this plot line and everything. And it's like, I think it actively drags down my score of every single episode they're in by like around 2 points, right? We had that 9 out of 10 rating on episode 5 of season 2. No Harfoots. No Harfoots. I also tend to throw the Stranger into that as well, because they all travel together and stuff. But honestly, both the Stranger and the Harfoots, all that stuff, in my opinion, should be, like Matt said earlier in the chat from Nerd of the Rings. He said it could just be cut in a super cut that hopefully we'll eventually get. Again, I think there is an incredible couple-hour show within the Rings of Power that we'll eventually get when all the seasons release. Somebody will go through, cut together an amazing telling of the Second Age out of the Rings of Power stuff, and just pretty much cut out the bad stuff is what I'm really hoping. And then we've got something that will maybe survive the ages as something that's really good.
I don't know if it'll be incredible, but I think it would definitely be better. I think they might need to add some stuff to make, because editing is not just cutting; it's also recontexting, sometimes reshooting. A lot of that. So
that's fair.
My opinion on it is that the Harfoots. So when you watch, or read or experience Lord of the Rings, right? The Hobbits present an interesting. All the characters that you meet are otherworldly, very superbly. The Hobbits are the only ones that really feel grounded in they're the closest to our real life without actually looking like us, but they act like us. They panic in situations. But what Lord of the Rings is about is showing that even those guys can become great heroes through their own acts, through not just tagging along of other adventures, but making their own decisions, going their own ways, and following what they think is right. That's not happening with the Harfoots. What we have with the Harfoots is we have two, young women kind of just complaining about their situation and hoping that the Stranger will do something interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's there is no build up, there is no stakes, because I just don't care about any of them. Even though they try to make me care about them, I just don't.
Right.
And recently, the Stranger plotline has also taken just a huge nosedive. At the start, it was like, there was a level of intrigue, like, who is this guy? What's his whole deal? And it was like, oh, it's totally not Gandalf. It's totally Gandalf. Is he doing Gandalf things? Not really. He's looking for a staff, and that is going to be this season. It's him finding a stick. Yeah. And I have so many problems with that. I talked all about it last episode. Of our episode recap. So feel free to go back and listen to my opinions on that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything that's going on with these guys could be cut, and it should have been. Never should have happened. Yeah. You can have Lord of the Rings without hobbits. It's possible.
Yep. And we see that in the Silmarillion. We see that in Numenor. We see that before the Third Age, they don't really come into the stories of Middle Earth at all.
Even the argument that's like, oh, they needed to include hobbits so the mainstream audience would feel like they're in Middle Earth. Like that, you don't need that. You really don't. When you talk to people who aren't huge fans about Lord of the Rings, they think about the massive battles, the sweet, crazy elves, and the heroic moments of man, and the very, very stalwart and funny dwarves. It's like, oh, and the hobbits are also there.
Right.
There was no need to include them. They were not a part of the story. And you've yet to provide me with a story that is worth telling regarding them. So, it was kind of just a huge blunder from the start, and they get to make up for it. I don't think they would.
Totally.
As to the second part of the question, what do you think Radagast would have done if he joined the Fellowship?
Radagast is interesting because he's one of those characters where he might be incredibly powerful or not really all that good. He's one of the two. He's probably not in the middle. He's either probably very powerful or not good at all, because he's a master of hues and shapes is what is said about him. And what that means is I'm pretty sure Radagast is a shapeshifter, and we get none of that. I'm pretty sure he could actively change his form into animals, based on that line alone. But we don't really get that with him when we see him. Having two Astari within one fellowship would be awesome, and it'd probably be too powerful. Again, the idea of the fellowship was it's like a little bit of power or a lot of power, but in a condensed form, and it's just sneaking around the Eye of Sauron, right? Sneaking around Middle Earth and trying not to have too much attention. That's why Glorfindel wasn't there. That's why you have others that weren't there. And I have a feeling Gandalf, for whatever, in some way, could mask his own power. I have a feeling that's probably the only reason he was allowed to go with the Fellowship, even though he's like a Maya and, and was probably glowing with power. Radagast was probably similar. So if he was added to it as maybe a 10th member, I mean, I don't think anything bad would come of it. It's another ally. It's someone who could communicate with nature. He probably would have done very well with the Ent plotline as well, in helping against Saruman. I don't know at the end of the day what the largest difference would have been, but he would have certainly helped. And again, I think maybe he was moderately powerful, but it seems to me he was either pretty weak for a wizard or pretty powerful and could shapeshift like no one else. So I don't know, except maybe Bjornings, I guess. Rowan, what do you think?
Yeah, the general understanding about Radagast, right? That he has his stuff that he cares about, and it's not the same. We care about the toy. So there's not really a huge. Almost feels like a Tom Bombadil. Yeah, we could bring him, but we don't know what's his skin in this game, right? So, and the Fellowship obviously didn't know that they were going to be running into Ent. So I don't know if they would have been able to make a big case to be like, all right, we need this guy with the Fellowship, instead of even if they had him there, I feel like they would still assign him to something else. Like, you can go help out with this. That's more skills are.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think that adding another Istari to this party really jeopardizes the whole secret mission thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, not only do we have one wizard, we have two wizards. Suddenly Saruman is not like, okay, I can get these guys, get the ring, and get out before Sauron notices. Suddenly he's like, all right, Sauron, there's some buffoonery about.
Yeah.
Something is amiss.
Almost half the wizards are just walking around with it. Yeah. Totally.
Of the remaining wizards,
yeah,
a majority of them are currently waltzing through Eriador and Rovanian. I suggest paying attention to this.
Yeah. Versus Gandalf, he's just wandering around all the time. It's like, yeah, that's nothing new. It's just Gandalf being Gandalf.
And perhaps there's an argument that Saruman would definitely still like underestimate them. It's very clear he doesn't think highly of either of them in comparison to himself. But I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All it takes is one Nazgul to be like, "Hey, wait a minute,"
hey,
and everything's shot.
Two pointy hat guys? No. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, TRIG Ireland says the essay on the Astari says that there were 5 chief Astari in the north. This implies that there were lesser Astari in the north and maybe also greater and lesser in the south. Any thoughts? Okay, that's really interesting. I need to do more research into that. But at the end of the day, I think there were only probably 5 wizards of note. Let me make sure. So Astari as a word, I want to make sure that just means like wizard, right? Astari. Quenya means wise one or those who know. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's a good distinction. Means wise one or those who know. That's cool. So it's a Quenya word. Usually refer to the wizards of Middle-earth. And the single form of the word is a star. So those who know, that could be referring to a lot of people that come from Valinor. It could be referring to Maiar at large. It might not just be referencing wizards. Huh. Yeah, I'm going to have to ponder this. I'm going to have to ponder the orb on this. because
there's some interesting implications with this.
Yeah. It might mean there are lesser. It's kind of like the whole Rings of Power, not the show, but the concepts of Rings of Power, because there were essays in lesser craft, I believe was the quote on there were like lesser Rings of Power.
Well, that's what Gandalf assumes the ring is.
Yes.
To start, right?
Yes.
That is an interesting magic ring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so lesser Rings of Power, let's say essays in craft, it's like, where did those go? And what does that mean? Are we talking about there being 15 random Rings of Power that engage one's abilities? Like, Lord of the Rings Online does some really cool stuff with this. If you play a High Elf, you get your own lesser Ring of Power. Just right out the gate. And I think that is such a cool idea. So with the Astar and Astari, that could refer to there being more mage-like people in the world or knowledgeable ones, right? It could refer to a whole host of things. So I think that is pretty cool. Huh. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's really cool. So, yeah, thanks for everybody who's tuning in now. Thanks for being here. Yeah, appreciate seeing you guys in the chat. Let's go back. So we got another super chat. Comic Nut 64 says, "Enjoy the cash, fellas. I'm driving home. Question: please be safe while driving. Did dwarves make weapons out of mithril as well as armor? I would like to say yes, and here's why. The Axe of Durin, found by Oin in Moria during Balian's expedition. I love Lord of the Rings Online's idea that it was made of mithril. It's the axe of the king Durin. Like, if there was a dwarvish weapon made of mithril, it would be that axe, made at the height of Khazad-dûm's power for the king. I would like to say yes, and a mithril weapon would be, especially if it was enchanted by elven magic. Let's go back to our earlier point, Ryan. That would cut through a lightsaber. Mithril axe infused with elvish magic.
I like how you talk smack about the Marvel magic metal, but the Lord of the Rings magic metal, now that's totally different.
Nah, it's totally, yeah, you're right. I guess I'm thinking more about the enchantments on it. Like Captain America's shield, you know, is enchanted by some Americans and British people from World War II. You know, maybe that's playing.
I would argue there's more enchanters in Marvel these days than there were in Dwarven Khazad-dûm.
It's fair.
Anyways, I think that the answer is that there are weapons made out of them, but I think something that seems to be lost on Rop is that Mithril was incredibly rare. It was incredibly rare and incredibly expensive because of so yeah, it was also better than steel, but it wasn't just that it was better than steel. That it was better than steel, it was pretty, and it was incredibly rare, which is why just like the mithril coat itself is just like a dragon hoard's worth of fortune just by itself. And I believe so. I did look it up. I got a quote here from Gandalf describing it. It says that all folk desired it. It could be beaten like copper. It could be polished like glass. The dwarves could make a metal, light and yet harder than tempered steel. Its beauty was like that of common silver, but the beauty of mithril did not tarnish or grow dim. Couple things. First, Rop Bash here said the dwarves could make a metal, not the elven ring crafters. Moving on.
I will say Nenya is the only one we know of that has mithril in it in the actual book.
I think that the harder than tempered steel combined with the all folk desired it is pretty indicative. Like, what do people make out of steel? They make, constructions of buildings. They don't necessarily make ornaments, which they made a lot of of mithril. I think that because they mentioned that it's more than tempered steel, that's specifically for arms and arms. Yeah,
and they probably make like an alloy. I mean, they can probably. It's one thing, again, Lord of the Rings Online does. It's like mithril infused steel, mithril infused gold. Yeah, they could probably make some sort of combination alloy of them. So, cool. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, Royan?
I think the answer is yes. I love the mithril axe.
Oh yeah. No, me too. And it's kind of funny because it has its own like story arc where they have to rebury it, and it's just like this is kind of cursed in a way. It's like just bringing ego upon the dwarves. We're gonna bury it back into Moria. So, Andrew Carlisle, thanks for your super chat. Hope to see you play Return to Moria soon, so I can yell at you about rope ladders again. I miss it, and I think just on my own time, I'm probably going to start playing it with some family members as well. But no, I think I've got a couple more live streams in me for the rest of the year. I don't think we've live streamed since last year too, so always good to be back on a stream. It's really fun. I would say we're going to do a live stream for season 2. As Rings of Power wraps up, we're going to live stream our final review of the whole season like we did last time. And then I want to do another charity live stream. And I'm not sure, but the channel's coming up on 10 years. In December, it'll be 10 years old. And so I'm wondering if I do a live stream then. But yeah, we'll find a time. That'd be fun. So awesome. Yeah, and that'd be fun to play with all of you guys. So let's see here. Greetings to everybody starting to tune in. I think we're going to start wrapping it up here soon. Ryan and I have been recording for many hours this morning, and many hours of that will never see the light of day. So, Mithril versus Valyrian Steel. Again, it's one of those things. It's just since they're from different lore, I can't really compare. I imagine they're meant to be very similar. It sounds like Valyrian Steel, though, is more common than Mithril based on Game of Thrones and stuff. So
okay, let's be clear. That's just the show. All right, the show is like everything's made out of Valyrian steel. No. Yeah, fair enough. I'm trying to think, are there any other substances? Again, like, you brought up the Marvel Vibranium.
Yeah, vibranium and adamantium, right? Like those two are pretty strong, pretty durable. So it's just hard to compare the substances of them.
You know how Wolverine can't die.
Yeah, true.
Then he got infused with adamantium. That's how strong it is. It's like it's insane stuff. And it's inherently, guys, I gotta be honest, inherently silly, right? It's like everything needs its own version of this is my unbreakable metal, so I can have cool stuff with it, which is cool until somebody else gets it, and somebody else gets it, and somebody else gets it. Suddenly everyone's got an unbreakable metal, so nobody.
Yes, yeah, that's power scaling too. It's just like eventually something broke Captain America's shield, which was whatever Thanos' sword was made out of, and it's like okay. But it even kind of does happen a bit in Lord of the Rings of like Anduril reforged, not Narsil, because like you mentioned in our first recording, it's like Narsil was literally broken. But Anduril versus versus
Michael Lublin tossed in unobtainium, bro. Oh my gosh! Don't even get me started on
unobtainium. I forgot about that.
Why is unobtainium so useful? Because we need it for the plot.
Oh man, I buried that in my mind. Yeah, so let's see here. Max asks, are there any characters from the Lord of the Rings you would have wished to see, like Imrahil? Yeah, Imrahil would have been really good to see. I feel like there's somebody in this.
If you Google Imrahil, it shows like a random Gondorian soldier, a captain-looking guy who's like, so maybe he was.
Yeah,
he wasn't credited. He wasn't mentioned. He had no lines, but maybe he was.
Exactly. It's kind of like I think somebody did that with like Círdan. You can see him in like one of the shots way off to the side of the dock, and it's like, oh, there he is. Oh, and he's gone. I guess you could see him when in the first few minutes of the movie too, when you kind of pick up when they are picking up their elven rings, you just see like a hint of him.
Now he's in rock, and he shaved.
Why did they make him shave, bro?
For what reason?
That's like that's his physical defining.
That's his
feature.
one thing.
Yeah, that's what separates him. He's not just another silver or blonde or dark-haired elf, right? But he's the bearded one. It's like one of three in the whole lore. Oh, I always make this argument that I love the movies, and I love that they had to make this choice or whatever with Éomer being further away, and then Gandalf having to come get him and then bring him to Helm's Deep. However, what we miss with that is something we get in the book. I always say it would have been good to have Erkenbrand of Helm's Deep in the movies, because then Éomer could have been at Helm's Deep with Aragorn and Gimli, and we could see those relationships develop like we do in the books, and then Erkenbrand comes in with Gandalf, right? And so that it's kind of less to see Erkenbrand and more to see more of the relationship between Éomer and the others develop. But Erkenbrand's a cool character for his own right. Yeah, so those are always the ones I jump to. Tom Bombadil, like, yes and no. I'm a little sour. Not on the character. Like, I love Tom Bombadil in the lore, but I'm a little sour because of how they've done him in Rings of Power. It's not even Tom, but it's reinforced in my mind that I think Jackson was right for the movies. He probably wasn't necessary in the movies because they tried to force him into Rings of Power and it just doesn't work. Let me see. Anyone else? Yeah, I mean, Glorfindel would have been cool to see, but I think how they did that and gave that to Arwen was a good idea. Like Eladon and Elrohir, the Grey Company, again, cool to see, but we get that in other mediums, kind of what they did and how they helped Aragorn. They just gave more to Legolas and Gimli, and that's fine, so cool. Let's do 2 more questions, Ryan.
Okay, well, Simon Batchelor most recently dropped in here just because I saw this and I went, oh, hey, hello there, love your channel. In the Hunt for Gollum movie, could we potentially see the Grey Company and Elrond's son? So, I say we could definitely see Elrond's sons if they follow what I was talking about and show some of like Aragorn's earlier, interactions with the Elven court of Rivendell.
Yeah.
Grey Company's a little bit more Probably, but I'm a little.
So
they're not exactly that.
They wouldn't have been the Grey Company yet. They would have been the just the Rangers of the North. However, theoretically, yes, because all the Rangers were kind of made aware to watch for Gollum on the borders of the Shire. And I think at one point one of them saw him, maybe not on the borders of the Shire, but some ranger somewhere saw him, and then he was gone. If I recall, I did a video on it a couple months ago, so I'm trying to remember back. But that it would be cool to see Rangers. And what's more, obviously you've got Halbarad, right? The only other named Ranger in Strider's company besides Strider. But Halbarad, it would be cool if the movies, this is just the fanboy in me, not required at all, but if the movie kind of referenced Rangers from different adaptations, like if there were some, so like they gave us Candaith from Lord of the Rings Online, Eridan from War in the North, right? Like you even just name dropping, it's like, oh, Eridan's keeping an eye on Angmar just to see if Gollum passes through here, and Candaith is keeping an eye on the Lone Lands near Weathertop. It's like, that would be sweet to see, just like, oh, they're paying attention to these different rangers, and kind of throwing them in as though they were canon. I don't know. That'd be cool. Obviously, Eladon Elrohir, absolutely. It's funny, every other adaptation besides the mainstream adaptations, Eladon and Elrohir are there. They're in the Born of Hope movie. Shout out to Born of Hope. They're in the Hunt. Are they in the Hunt for Gollum? Maybe not in the Hunt for Gollum. But Born of Hope, definitely. I just feel like I see them a lot. They're in War in the North. They're in Latro, Lord of the Rings Online. They're in a lot of other adaptations. Just not the main ones.
Why they're in everything? Because they're rad.
They are rad.
They're awesome.
They are so cool. They are so cool.
They are not. At least they're not cast.
So in Born of Hope, they're there because they're with
Hunt for Gollum.
Okay. Yeah, not Hunt for Gollum, but it's just funny. They are rad. They are super cool. Let's see here. The Hunt for Gollum. Let's see. Balrog of Morgoth says, I think it would be cool if they did the Hunt for the Ring simultaneously as a villain side of the story. That would be cool. Again, Gollum, I love Andy Serkis' Gollum. I love Gollum the character, but I am a bit Gollumed out because of, I think, the Gollum game, and then all of a sudden now we're getting a Gollum movie. It's like, okay. he's interesting, don't get me wrong, and he's an interesting character to develop the themes of pity versus malice and all that kind of stuff with, but he's just not the most interesting character in Middle-earth. He's not in the top 10 in my opinion, but he's interesting in his own right. I think if they focus too much on Gollum running away from Aragorn, I don't know. I'm excited to see Andy Serkis back in the role, though.
We'll see if it actually comes. I trust nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Balrog also says, no one ever talks about the scabbard Galadriel gifts to Aragorn that makes Endril's blade always sharp and never tarnish. I always forget about that, too. That is so sick. That is so cool. I love that. Sharpens the blade every time you draw it, or, like, put it back in the sheath. That's so sick. Let's see here. Let's do one more question or comment or something. Let's see here. Any standout to you, Ryan? Thank you all for your comments and stuff. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
I don't know. I don't remember if there was a question. I just want to shout out TRIG earlier for talking about some crossovers. Totally forgot about Discworld. You're absolutely right. Every Discworld character would have such strong opinions with Lord of the Rings. Best to just leave them out of it. Because that just, it would be a whole thing. But like, dude, Granny Weatherwax would be like, she'd have the whole thing solved in 15 minutes. Still have time to make tea for everybody.
Let's see here. Yeah, well, all right. I think we'll start to wrap it up here as well. We had some really good conversations. Michael says I'd love to see an Angmar movie or TV show. I still think there's so many things in the appendices that we should get adaptations for. The Fall of Moria, Angmar War, Gondorian Civil War, right? Just all these different things, and the Tale of Aragorn and Arwen. the travel of the hobbits coming to the Shire. I'd love that. We're getting our War of the Rohirrim, so I'm happy with that one. But the foundation of Rohan with Eorl the Young and Kirion the Steward, it just it'd be so good. But I feel like people are too afraid to dive in. Studios are too afraid to dive into that deep of the lore. It's like, oh, Gandalf's not in the Fall of Moria. We're not going to do that. Gollum isn't in all of these things. We can't do adaptations if Gollum's not there.
Except for Rop, bro.
Hey, I was gonna say, except for Rings of Power.
Are you telling me Rop is the best Lord of the Rings adaptation because it doesn't have Gollum in it?
No. No, it's just.
Do I have Yoisten live now?
Oh gosh,
I've got this recording.
No, I don't hate Gollum. I love Gollum, but he's everywhere, and it's like we're getting the same story a lot. And I think in the movie it could work. I think the Gollum game just like frustrated me for many reasons.
Yeah, here's the problem with Gollum. You want the problem with Gollum? Here's the problem with Gollum. Ryan's going to stand on business. Okay?
Heck yeah.
Gollum is a recognizable Lord of the Rings character, right? He's recognizable because Andy Serkis blasted it out of the park with performance, a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But so when studios see that, they're like, this will sell. But here's the problem with Gollum, okay? Gollum is not relatable. Yeah. Gollum is very gross. He's very pitiful at best, and other times, just an avid, hated character. The average person sees Gollum and, turns their nose up. I know this because my mom does it. Every time we watch I force my mom to watch Lord of the Rings. She's like, I don't want to watch any scenes with Gollum in it. He's gross. And I'm like, you know what? That is fair. And so when you come out here, you're like, no, this will be great. The kids will love it. And you're like, what is it? It's like, oh, it's a Gollum show. I'm like, no. The kids will not.
You're right. You're totally right. I mean, even when I was a kid watching Lord of the Rings, it was kind of creepy and stuff. He kind of reminded me of one of my cats, so I kind of thought that was funny. But that, his story is told so much.
What did your cat look like?
It was just the creeping and the crawling, dude. It's just I could picture my cat having that voice, It's just being a weirdo. But I love the character, especially when he is a piece that works against other characters. Like when we see his antithetical nature to Frodo or Sam, and how Sam is all merciful and pity and loving and courage, and then Gollum is generally not those things, except that one moment where they flipped roles and Gollum was reaching out to just put his hand on Frodo outside of Shelob's lair, and he was close to repenting almost, maybe, and then Sam was like, dude, get away from me. They kind of flipped roles in that one moment. I find all that fascinating. It's a tear-jerking moment where he almost reclaims his humanity as a hobbit, and then it's gone forever. All this kind of stuff, but it's just it's just so much of him to focus on. Again, I think it's more interesting if he's used as almost a character to question Aragorn, because Aragorn is valiant and hardy and he's a strong man, and then Gollum is literally not any of those things. And so for that contrast, I think that is more interesting. Again, the Gollum game, I think probably at this point my rating was probably too high for that game for what it was, but I wasn't used to platformers. I think I originally gave it that rating when I was halfway through the game. It was something like that. But by the end of the game, I was just so sick of the character and just so sick of the game. So I think I'm still a little Gollumed out. I can't believe I finished that game. I'll literally never download that again.
I can't believe you finished that game.
Oh, why did
I not come anywhere close?
Oh, so yeah, I put myself through it. Whatever. There were some good things about it, but overall, blah. So, yep. All right, everybody. We've been recording for, I think this live stream's about an hour and a half, but then add on the hour of podcasting before that we messed up on. But yeah, it's been super fun. Again, we'll have to do more live streams. Always looking forward to them. So, yeah, my friends, thank you all for being here. Royan, thank you for being here and willing to jump on again. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. Happy Hobbit Day, my friends. So if you're not sick of hearing my voice yet, while we were doing this live stream, my video did drop for the day. It's what were the hobbits doing during the first and second ages? Like, where were they? And so go check that out if you're so inclined. I think you'll enjoy it. We've got more reviews of Rings of Power, 2 more episodes coming your way, and then another live stream where we're gonna dissect the whole thing. I've got a special podcast coming with some friends of mine, Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs, some Game of Thrones guys, as we kind of go back and forth between House of the Dragon Season 2 and Rings of Power Season 2. So, and then, War of the Rohirrim coming up. We've got another charity live stream at some point, and a 10-year special with whatever that is for the channel. So lots of good stuff coming your way. Thank you guys for continuing to be here, being around. If you want more podcasts, if you want to join our Discord server, anything like that, please consider joining our Patreon or our YouTube memberships. Even $1 a month gets you access to a bunch of different things. So thank you for that and considering supporting the channel. And thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members: Brian Hunley, Peter Sheppard, John Hume, Rhys Jenkins, Arthur Merlin, Theodore, Andrew Carlisle, and Zoomi. My friends, thank you all so much for being here. Happy Hobbit Day, and we'll see you on our next adventure. Farewell.